Okay, this first question we got this week comes in from Icaro, and it says, "Dear Adam, Kate, and Drew." Sorry, Dylan, he left you out. I hope you guys are doing well. I hope you guys are doing well. I haven't done my base training properly, and my A race is 12 weeks from now. It used to be in October. That's why I neglected it. So I'm guessing it used to be in October, and they bumped it up for some reason. It's a 2-hour road race.
No. I think he meant
4.3. What?
Sorry. I think he meant like it used to be October, February, and he's crunched on time. That's how I read it.
Okay. Maybe. Okay. Well, anyways, it's a 2-hour road race on a 4.3 kilometer circuit with rolling terrain. For context, I am probably 10 kilograms over my racing weight, and my FTP is below 200, where it used to be 250. My question is, what would be the best way to emergency train for this race? Try to build base with lifting and volume only and not worry about specific training, or do I have enough time to build a little base in 45 days and focus on specific training after that? Thanks for the great content. Best regards, Icaro.
Panic training.
Yeah.
I think that's a funny term.
Okay, how much time does he have again?
12 weeks.
3 months.
Yeah.
I mean that's like a decent amount of time. You don't even have to panic that hard for that. I mean, ideally you'd want 5 months before an A race, but like 3 months, I don't know. You don't have to panic that hard for that.
But he's also wondering, like, should he, because he has neglected his base season, what should he do with those 3 months?
Yeah. And I guess he's also not been lifting, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, let's assume he's not been lifting and also has some body composition optimization to do.
Yeah. Now, I guess that is the lifting question, I think, is actually one that's up for debate here. Do you start lifting with 3 months to go before an A race, or do you not? Because it does take time to adapt to the lifting and not actually be sore from a lifting session. And I mean, by the time you get through that process, then you actually are in crunch time. So I'm kind of
benefits.
I don't know. I'm a little bit on the fence about it. I don't know what you guys think.
I mean, honestly, I wasn't even thinking about the strength training. If he's already this far behind on training, I was just thinking he should focus on, and it sounds like he wants to take this race pretty seriously. So I was just thinking he should just focus on the bike.
I think he should.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just thinking, like, if he's already worried about his fitness for the race, then I would say we would want to maximize his volume on the bike. And if the 2 hour, to me, I guess the 2 hours that he'd be in the gym per week would be better spent on the bike at this point, was kind of what I was thinking, I guess.
Strength training doesn't mean you need to train like a bodybuilder and do 2 45-minute sessions to an hour session per week. Like, you can do 2 functional movements like Turkish get-ups and kettlebell windmills, 4 rounds of that, and it ends up being 15 minutes. And the kettlebell doesn't have to be like
Turkish Delight. Did you just say Turkish Delights? What was that?
Have you not heard of Turkish get-up? That's like the best all-encompassing move. Oh, it's so good. Wow.
I thought that was
they're very hard.
So is that like a deadlift? Because I thought the deadlift.
No,
was
it's
the
like
most...
a 4-part movement. It's hard to explain, but you lay on your back, you arm press the kettlebell up, and then you sit up with it, keeping your arm extended, and then you do almost like a glute bridge from there, and then side bend to stand up, and then you reverse the whole motion. But doing like 4 rounds of those 2 movements, the get-ups and the windmills or something like that, like picking 2 more functional movements, doing a handful of rounds, and making your strength session like 20 minutes long, like that's not going to have a huge impact. on your legs for the following workout, but you're going to get some benefit from it. Think of it as like
You're
extended activation before your ride.
Yeah, I'm kind of outside of the base season for most people, I'm kind of out on going to the gym, honestly. I think that you can do enough functional movement training at home, or like, in your office or whatever, like wherever is most convenient for you. Because like the big thing with going to the gym, and maybe this is kind of what Drew's getting at, like you might not spend an hour in the gym, but you might take an hour to go there, lift, shower, get home or whatever. Like it might be an hour round trip, and that's an hour that could have been spent on the bike. Whereas if you've got 15 minutes and you've got a routine that you can do in your office or in your home, you can just fit it in between life. You can do exactly what Caitlin's talking about, where you maintain or even build some like quality functional strength, and it has zero impact. Like you're not going to spend that 15 minutes doing anything else that's at least that's at least constructive, for your overall training. So you're not really replacing any of your training with that. Whereas like during the base season, like if you're doing like a true strength build, like that's fine because you're not worried as much about volume at that point, or not really base season, but even, kind of like the preparatory part of the season. But yeah, honestly, like for cyclists and just overall lifestyle and longevity, you really don't need a gym. You can do a lot of this at home or just with some basic kettlebells or free weights.
Yeah, I agree with Caitlin. I forgot, like about a year ago, I did a couple videos on strength training, and I remember the biggest light bulb moment I had in researching those was like, there was all these massive gains. Like I think the biggest one was like a 17% increase in time to exhaustion. And the protocol for the lifting group was like 5 sets of 4 to 5. They were only doing less than 30 lifts. Like they did 30 squats. And you're like, that's it? Like that's all they did. And then they saw that big of an improvement. So I think what Caitlin is saying, if you like get it down to the bare bones of here are the lifts that I like, the essentials, point probably is worth.
Drew, what I will say about those studies though is they may not have been doing a high volume of lifts, but they are doing extremely heavy lifts. Like they had
I don't even think it was like extreme. It was heavy.
It wasn't.
Yeah.
No, it was. I've reviewed the research. Like they have them do very heavy squats. Like
relative. If you're only doing 4 to 5 reps, that's going to be a heavy load.
Yeah. So it's heavy.
Like
it's heavy. It's very heavy, is what I'm saying. It's not like a 1 rep max, but it's heavy, dude. 5 reps. That's
what I'm saying.
And you're maxing out at 5. That's heavy. That's heavy.
So I think Dylan, you're getting at that. There's still going to be some adaptation.
I don't call that. I don't call that like functional at-home strength training. That's not functional at-home strength training.
No, it's not.
Yeah. I don't think you can do that. You have to have weight for that.
Like the volume of lifts isn't high, but it's heavy, dude, and you're gonna be sore after that.
Yeah, but
you're gonna be real
in my head, if you're doing 5 reps, it can't be that heavy. To me, 2 reps is when you're really.
Look, I mean, 5 reps is going to be like 95% of your max. It's
5 reps
heavy.
is in the, like, if you are looking at rep ranges, for traditional, I don't know if you want to call it bodybuilding or fitness. If you're at the 5 rep range, that's in the strength building rep range. That's the lowest. Strength, that's the lowest rep range. You know what I mean? Like if you're at 3 to 5, that's like the lowest they go.
Yeah.
Not 2 to 3. It's like the lowest, and like 5 to 8 is mid, and then anything over 8
obviously 1 is the lowest you could possibly go if we're talking about a number.
I guess
like
depends.
If somebody's doing a workout in the gym, like 3 to 5 is like the lowest they'll ever go.
Yeah, because you're not going to max lift every day, every time you're.
I don't know.
Doing
I think there's a big difference between 3 and 5.
Okay, all right. I think
I
we're getting a
know,
little
I know.
too into the weeds here, but what I'm trying to say about those studies is that's not functional strength training. They're lifting heavy and they're getting sore.
All
Okay,
right, bringing
true.
it back. So the strength training that I'm suggesting is not over the course of 6 to 8 weeks going to have a direct impact on your max 5-second, 10-second sprint. Like heavy lifting could potentially have. But what I will say is going from 0 to 100 or trying to, which I don't think you should do, but trying to quote unquote, like you said, or cram panic train. I do think that will only support your body's ability to handle the increased volume that you're trying to do.
Well, I don't.
And it could help with some of the body composition stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
what should he do? What should he do on his bike?
I don't. Did we figure out what he should be doing in the gym?
Not yet.
I guess I'm kind of in agreement. I wouldn't do a normal off-season gym routine like I would normally prescribe to somebody because you don't have enough time. But if you want to do some functional strength work, nothing wrong with that.
Agreed.
I think that's the conclusion I'm coming to here. As far as on the bike, I think that, you know, in an ideal world, you would have 3 months of base training, 2 months of build. You can easily shorten that to 2 months of base training, 1 month of build. And honestly, like 3 months versus 5 months, we're talking about a very small percentage of difference in final fitness, even with 2 months left, because it's there's diminishing returns. Like 1 month is vastly better than no months. 2 months, it's a little, like, there's a little bit less returns. 3 months, there's even less returns. 4 months, there's even less returns. And then you just get to the point after that where, like, we're talking about fractions of a percent difference. Like, I think you'd be at 95% of the shape you'd be after 5 months of training if you only trained for 3 months.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
So he doesn't need to panic train.
Well, 3 months is, I don't think you need a panic panic training to me is like you're Scott McGill and you got 1 month and you do a 30-hour, like 2 30-hour weeks. You know what I mean?
So like panic training, I tend to think of like you have to implement something that's sort of on the radical side of things.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. I don't think this is, 12 weeks, you shouldn't have to do anything radical. And that's good because doing something radical with your training has a lot of risk involved. Whereas this, you can just do a traditional base build or even just base specialty and normal volume, normal intensity, frequency, and should be good to go.
Yeah, I was thinking he could even do like a base and then like a mix and then a specialty. Like the middle month could still be high volume and he could start to do specific high intensity work and just do those at the same time. If he's not racing, he's going to be fatigued if he does that. But if his race is still a month or two after that block, then I think it would be good. And then if the last month was more just specific workouts and maybe he pulls the volume back a little bit, like that's might be what I would do.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of like how I approach most training plans. Like when I get to the build phase is when I start specializing what the intensity looks like, the distribution as well as the specific work that we're doing. So volume stays high, and that's kind of like why it's called build, I guess. Volume stays pretty high, but then you're working in some more specific intensity. At least that's the approach that I take.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Nice.
Cool. Anything else to add here for Icaro?
I think it's good that his event's only 2 hours too. Like, it'd be a whole different story if he was trying to train for Unbound for 3 months. But because the event's only a 2 hour road race, I think that makes it a lot simpler to train for that.
Yeah. So one other thing that I would add too is, so, you mentioned you're 10 kilos above racing weight. Being that, like, we're already talking less than traditional duration of time before your event. I think it'd be risky to try and lose all 10 kilos before your race. Like I just don't see it being realistic that you're going to get down to that racing weight, and I wouldn't put a ton of emphasis on that even. I would focus more on getting into the best physical like conditioning shape you can be in and let the body composition just kind of come as it will. It's probably going to naturally optimize as you're going through the training. But I think to try and lose 10 kilos in 12 weeks, that's while you're also ramping up your training. That seems challenging.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't do that.
Okay, cool. Let's move on to Declan's question. Declan says, hey, I've been riding competitively for 3 years. I'm 15 years old, and I was wondering how I should train for a 24-hour relay race, team of 4, in early August, since I only have about an hour to ride every day after school before the sun goes down, and I'm free for longer rides on most weekends. Note, I have at least 10 other races in addition to this race, then the cyclocross season in the fall. Also, I'm doing deadlifts and squats in the gym, 2 to 3 sets of each with 4 to 6 reps, 3 to 5 minutes of rest, 2 times a week. So basically doing a pretty solid gym session twice a week. Should I continue this, taper it off, or add any other lifts throughout the season? Thanks for all your time and thought to answer my question, Declan.
So I don't know if Declan has time to do 2 or 3 rides in a day, but that would be highly specific to doing a relay 24-hour race. If you ride an hour in the morning, an hour for lunch, and then an hour in the afternoon, that's probably very close to what you're going to be doing in the relay race. I don't know how big the team is. Like, is it a
4
it's
people?
It's a 4-person.
4-person. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
It sounds like he could do something like that, some type of race day simulation on the weekend where he can break his ride up into a few different ones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't.
Also, assuming that Declan's going to have summers off, right?
Maybe. If Declan doesn't have a summer job of some sort. Yeah. You could train specifically for the 24-hour race. Personally, I mean, you can have your own priorities about what you want to peak for, but I personally, if I were you, I don't know if I would peak for the 24-hour race. I would kind of use the 24-hour race as like a fun event to do with friends and almost more as like a training opportunity. And then I think what I would peak for personally is, I don't know, maybe that cyclocross season or maybe some of those other races that you have going on. Like I don't know if I would personally try to customize my training plan and peak around a 24-hour team event, but that's just me.
Yeah. So Caitlin, you just got done doing a 24-hour race, right?
Yeah, and I actually I was registered as geared solo. My husband was on a 4-person single speed team, and then he lost one of the teammates. They got sick, so I deferred my entry and turned my bike into a single speed and did a 4-person relay team. So I wish we had more information about what the race format was like. I feel like it's unlikely that he's going to be doing a point to point, and probably more like a lapped circuit. And if it's did he say anything if it was a mountain bike?
I mean, that's a good question, I guess. I'm assuming, just because of the way that 24-hour races are typically run, it's a mountain bike lapped 24-hour race.
Yeah. Laps are normally, I've done a few of these 12-hour, 24-hour, and it's usually like a 12 to 16 mile lap. So
hour to an hour and a half is kind of like usually what they rule of thumb. Yeah.
And never anything that's too technical to where at 3 a.m. you're going to feel uncomfortable to ride. So they're usually pretty fast rolling. So
for you, I guess like the question would be similar to what Dylan's saying, like being, especially for you, because last minute you had to change from thinking you were doing the 24 hours solo to then all of a sudden switching it up and doing 4-person relay team. Did you feel like there was really much that you needed or desired as far as fitness goes? Or were you able to just kind of like transition into that format pretty easily, and you're kind of feeding off of the energy of the race and your teammates and relying on residual fitness and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, part of it was a relief because I wasn't super prepared to ride upwards of 250 miles. It ended up being 4 laps, which was only like 60 some miles.
Yeah.
So in that sense, it was a relief. But for me, it was a little different because I hadn't spent much time on a single speed. So that's a whole different. It's like being on a very steep stair stepper at times. So it felt like I did a full blown strength session after each lap. So that was a little challenging, but I will say single speeding is so fun. But yeah, I mean, I wish I had done a little bit more high intensity to, I would have had I known that that was going to be the format that I had to ride. But I think the hardest part too is not necessarily trying to maintain the same duration per lap, but just bring yourself to come back out, like, because you have potentially like 4 hours between your turn, unless y'all are going to end up doing double or triple laps, which I wouldn't think so. I think it's most advantageous to keep in rotation, so everybody does a single lap. And if that's the case, then I think your schedule is fine. What you have available, the amount of time you have available to train, for something that's like an hour to an hour and a half, where you're just trying to go as hard as you can, to support the team, and then try and do that every time you go out. So
yeah,
I'm with Dylan, like breaking up your ride into 2 separate rides to kind of get a feel of what that's going to be like coming off the bike, eating, changing, kind of bringing yourself down, and then getting ready to ramp yourself back up again.
Yeah. I've never done any 24-hour racing, but the closest thing I would have done that's similar is like multiple races in a day. So I've done like short track and then an XC race in the same day, or in cyclocross season, I've done like 2 to 3 different categories in a day. And a lot of times those races are separated by more than a few minutes, hours, sometimes between. And I would say the same thing. I mean, it's the only thing that you could do is try and simulate it with 2-a-days or 3-a-days. But otherwise, as far as like specific training goes, you kind of just have to train for what you think the race is going to be for that one lap for the most part. And like, that's going to be the best you can do. And then the rest is just carrying enough aerobic capacity in to withstand the multiple efforts in the day. But
should we talk about his strength training? Because was like, I don't know. That was part of his question. Maybe that's honestly more interesting.
So going back to it,
I don't want to dismiss. I don't want to dismiss like his goals, but I just personally, I wouldn't make a 4-man relay 24-hour race like a race.
Yeah,
that's
agreed.
Just a team player. He wants to.
I'm not a team player, man. I hate team sports. I'm really not.
Wow.
That's just.
I mean, it could be risky too, because if all 3 of the other teammates are not treating it as an A race, and then you're throwing all your cards in this basket, then it might not pan out for you. So I get that, and it's just, I'm surprised Dylan said that someone should actually have fun at a race, but I agree. I think that a 24-hour race should be fun.
Yeah, I mean, I don't say that meaning you shouldn't try. Like, I think you should try during the race. I just don't think that you should necessarily build your training around that. I would build your training around some of the other goals you have, because it does sound like you have other goals that are interesting.
Yeah. So going off of the strength training here, and I think this could apply, we could basically apply this to any part of his season that he is considering to be, peak season. But he says he's doing deadlifts and squats in the gym, 2 to 3 sets of each, with 4 to 6 reps of each, with 3 to 5 minutes of rest in between. And he's doing that twice a week. Should he continue this, taper it off, or add any other lifts throughout the season?
Mm-hmm. So this is what I'll say about doing that kind of lifting, or trying to do that kind of lifting year round, is I think every single year I tell myself, this is the year that I'm going to maintain lifting the whole year. And it never happens. It never happens ever. And since I've started lifting, which is, I don't know, 10 years ago. And I think that I guess it depends on what your schedule is, how much you're training, what kind of racing you're doing. But because there are some masters athletes that I've coached that can pull it off, and maybe it's just that their overall weekly volume is low enough that they can handle the extra load of the gym work too. But there comes a point where it just is not feasible. For me personally,
I think it just needs to look different, though. Your cycling training doesn't look the same year round. I don't think your strength training should either.
Yeah, I mean, I've tried a number of things. I've reduced the number of lifts. I've reduced the amount of weight. I've tried to reduce the training load of the gym sessions, and there just comes a point where it's not feasible.
Is it because you personally feel like the gym sessions become too challenging and kind of overwhelming, or is it you just can't find the motivation or time to get to the gym?
Oh, it's definitely not motivation, and it's definitely not time.
Okay.
It's that there's so much training load, or there's so much fatigue built up from racing that if to fit in anything else, like I'm dipping over the edge of overtraining. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like I'm already dipping over the edge with the amount of training load that I give myself sometimes, and to add anything more onto that would be, you know, I can't add anything more onto that. I'd be overtrained.
So you're too fatigued to even get to the gym, let alone go to the gym and do half of a training session.
I can physically get to the gym and I can physically do the workout. I'm too
scared. It just feels too much.
I'm too scared of overtraining.
Gotcha.
Like
if you're doing 25 to 30 hour weeks, like, I understand. I mean, I don't understand, but I could imagine that I'm not going to get to the gym either, but I don't think that's the case for a lot of people.
Fair.
Yeah. So I don't know when Declan is fitting in these gym sessions either. Because it says Declan has an hour after school, basically before the sun goes down, to do riding. So I don't know if maybe Declan's doing these gym sessions in the evening or during a lunch break, or maybe you've got like a powerlifting class at school that you're part of. But let's assume that the workload is not too much necessarily, like as far as overall volume, and he's able to fit this in. How would you restructure or periodize the strength training around this race season?
Well, I think the training load from your gym sessions needs to decrease somehow, and you can do that in a number of ways. You could decrease the number of lifts you're doing. You could decrease the amount of weight you're lifting so that the intensity of the lifts is lower. You could do different movements that are less stressful, because squat and deadlifts are probably the most stressful lifts that you can possibly do in a gym. Not just to your legs, but to your entire body. If you could potentially think about just isolating quads if that's important to you. Like, you want to maintain quad strength, but you don't want to have like the full body fatigue that you get when you do a really heavy deadlift.
Sure.
So
for his big, like, I don't know, main race season looks like, but at some point I think the sessions that he listed out are great, and doing it 2 times a week is great. And at some point I would say, let's dial that back to 1 session a week, if not 0, going into, like, if he's got a cyclocross season and he's racing every weekend, then probably just drop it all together. And then, but maybe right before the season, you dial back to 1 session a week. And if you are maintaining it, 1 session a week with lighter weight, I think. But I don't have a problem with the lifts he's doing. I think he would just need to dial back the weight and just lift less heavy. That's what I try to do throughout the season. Last year I did decently good. I guess because like I think the thing that happens with me, similar to Dylan, is at some point it doesn't happen because there'll be like a 2 week stretch, 2 or 3 week stretch where either, like I've got back-to-back races or I'm traveling, and then I end up not going to the gym for like 2 or 3 weeks. And then I'm like, is it worth it because of the initial soreness that I know I'm going to have? At that point, I'm like, do I really want to like deal with that initial soreness again to revamp my strength training, or do I just want to focus on the bike? And usually I do what Dylan just said and just kind of turn my attention to the bike and like not worry about the gym.
Yeah. And I think too, Declan, like you're 15, you have so many years of cycling ahead of you that you can think of these upcoming years as laying the foundation for taking it even further. And so strength training, I think you should definitely maintain year round. And like I said, it should look different, or maybe just drop it to 1 session per week, but keep doing it.
Another thing that I'll do is I usually give myself a pretty decent mid-season break. And so if the strength training drops off before I hit that mid-season, you said in the mid-season break, because I usually will do in the middle of the season, and maybe I usually like for the whole month of June, like the last few years, I don't have basically any racing in June and not even that much in July. So like, and then it kind of just tapers off.
Sure. Yeah, no, that makes sense. All right, cool. Well, yeah, good luck with it, Declan. Look forward to hearing some updates as you're progressing. Let's hit this last one here. This is from Felicity. She's talking about lifting for sprinters. So kind of transitioning from that lifting.
Lots of lifting questions this week.
Yeah.
So Felicity wants to know, what is the latest science on weightlifting for sprinters? Do you have any recommendations for specific exercises and how many reps I should be aiming for? My understanding is that specific sprint training is different from standard lifting that you might do in a base phase. What can I do to look more like, or at least bike more like Lorena Wiebes? I think
Lorena
that's how you say it. Wiebes.
Oh man.
Thanks, Felicity.
I'm assuming Lorena Wiebes is this famous female sprinter. I don't know. I'm not familiar.
She's a baller on the road, but also, track sprinter as well.
Okay, track sprinter. Usually track sprinters do look pretty baller. Like, they're the
Yeah, and Felicity doesn't specify whether she's talking about track sprinting or like bunch sprinting on the road, but maybe we can just apply this generally.
That's a good question. I'll be honest, I don't know if I've done the research or if the research exists about lifting specifically for sprinting. I mean, I know that lifting for cycling improves your sprint, but if you're trying to tailor it specific for sprinting, like I don't know of a change that I would make to the gym session, to be honest with you. Maybe the one change that I would make is include more explosive movements.
Yes. Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
So like box jumps or doing more explosive lifts with lighter weights. Like that's probably the change that I would make. But I don't necessarily, and I could be wrong here because like I said, I don't know if the research exists because I feel like I've read every single study about lifting for cycling. I think I've read them all. And there are studies that say that lifting improves performance, but it didn't necessarily do a different protocol than any other study that tried to improve any other performance marker.
Sure.
So that's probably the only change I would make.
I would periodize your strength because strength supports power and speed. So you have to be getting that base of heavy lifting before you move into the explosive lifting. Because we were talking about the rep range. Heavy lifting is like, for max strength, is that, 5 to 10 reps. And the explosive lifts are the 2 to 3 reps. So lighter weight, but they're explosive lifts focused on force and speed, like your cleans and things like that. So making sure you're incorporating those lifts. But I do want to touch on, I don't know whether you were joking or like to look more like Lorena Wiebes. I haven't taken a good look at her quads, but unfortunately a lot of physique is genetic. Like we've all had that girl on our high school soccer team or track team, and she's just like doing all the same lifts as us or eating the same crappy cafeteria food, but she's just shredded. And then her parents walk in on parents' night and you're like, oh, that's not fair. Like, I see where she gets it. So a lot of the physique part is just genetic. Some people, no matter how much lifting they'll do, they'll never have a six pack. So just keep that in mind. But
yeah, cycling is a sport where what you look like doesn't matter at all. It's just about who crosses the finish line first. So in my opinion, you should never try to look like anything. You should just do what it takes to make you faster. I mean, I think that's obvious, but like, don't try to look like something. Just try to
I don't know that that's always obvious. I think that's a really valid point.
No, you're right. I mean, like, a lot of people get, because cycling is also a watts per kilo sport, or, a power to weight sport. So a lot of people try to emulate really light riders, and maybe they just naturally aren't that body type and they shouldn't be emulating those riders. That's kind of like, I guess, the opposite end of the spectrum. Like, I'm assuming this girl wants big quads, but
yeah, I mean, like there was that guy in the tour last year. Can't remember who it was. Abramson. Yes, that's it. And he gained like 20 kilos and got faster, like uphill, sprinting, all around, way faster. It's like that's a really good example of someone that like could have gotten caught up in wanting to try and look like a climber and was missing out on performance improvements because of it. And, all of a sudden decided, hey, I'm going to put on some muscle mass and, whatever. And 20 kilos is no joke. And all around everything got faster. So again, it's like, what can you do to maximize your own performance and potential?
Yeah. Now, if you strength train, there's a good chance that your quads will get bigger, but like that shouldn't be. I feel like, and I think this. I think she was just making a little joke at the end there, which I appreciate. But that shouldn't be your main goal. Like your main goal should be getting faster, not looking like something.
Go ahead, Kaylin.
I've mentioned before too, for women specifically, it is really hard when I don't know how much you're riding per week, but to actually see hypertrophy because your body's almost working against you as you're doing high volume on the bike. So making sure you're meeting the nutritional demands and like really keeping an eye on protein to maximize the strength gains is super important.
Yeah, I was going to mention creatine. Like, I think at this point, to me, a no-brainer. Like the benefits of creatine for strength training, I think, are profound. I think for explosive, like exactly what she's talking about, explosive training. Like if you want to get more out of your strength training, then supplementing with creatine is going to help you do even more in the gym.
Yeah, I mean that's a really good point because a lot of times you'll look at the a supplement like creatine and try and wonder like how is it actually going to benefit me on the bike? And you could say like by supplementing with creatine, maybe it can improve your sprint at the end of the race, but you have to like make sure that you're getting to the end of the race with like the those reserves still full. But if you kind of flip it on its head and think about, okay, how can I get faster because I'm able to train better and improve my training performance, including strength training, then that's where it's like, whether or not the creatine has any effect on your on the bike performance on race day, that's like negligible. Where you can get the maximum amount of benefit is from all of improvements in your training across the board. So I totally agree with what you just said, Drew, and definitely think. And Caitlin, I mean, you might be able to shed a little more information. I don't know. I don't remember the correlation between improvements in strength and even like cognitive performance with creatine supplementation for men versus women. I don't know if there's like a distinction there.
I don't know if there has been a study done for like comparing the benefits between men and women.
Okay, so it's pretty much standard, like universally applied that it's an improvement.
That's all I've seen. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I've heard Stacy Sims say that it benefits females more than men.
Okay.
Oh,
So
there's more for women to take it than men.
Sure.
I can't tell you why. Couldn't tell you the mechanism behind that, but I've heard Stacy Sims say that before. For females, it's even more beneficial.
Cool.
Yeah.
So let's go back to, her specific question. Let's maybe just give Felicity a couple examples of some of those more explosive type movements that she could incorporate into her gym training to get more, specificity out of, let's say, towards sprinting. And I know, Dylan, like you said, like there's not a ton of like research to back this up necessarily, like specific on training, but we can at least use our own intuition to give her some advice there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean the one that came to my mind was box jumps. You could do weighted box jumps too, because sometimes just jumping on a box isn't like enough load, unless maybe you have a super high box. Like, sometimes the boxes that they have at the gym, you could keep jumping on the box like 50 times, which you want something with a little higher load than that. So you could either do weighted box jumps or you could do a higher box. That's the first thing that came to my mind. I know you could do some other more Olympic style lifts. I actually personally have never done Olympic style lifts.
How's your sprint?
Good one.
Good one, Caitlin.
I actually think my fresh sprint power is great. Like I can hit 14 on a good day. And I don't think it's because I don't do Olympic style lifts. Like I'm just worried about hurting myself, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And that's a caution that I would give to a lot of cyclists. And look, like maybe she's more experienced with lifting, but like you do have to be experienced with lifting to do Olympic style lifts.
Yeah. Especially to get a lot out of your, like if you're talking about doing explosive cleans, that is a movement that has high risk for injury if you're not doing it with proper form. I was thinking like one that might be beneficial because she's probably already doing some form of squats would be box squats, where you're like limiting your range of motion, and that's going to be a little bit more specific to your pedaling form and where you're getting the most power out of yourself, out of your pedal stroke. But then you can, do like explosive box squats. So you're basically squatting down until you're sitting on a box and then you're exploding back upwards, basically as fast as possible.
Mm-hmm.
In college, I was in the gym a lot at the same time as the BMX team. So I remember, and all they train for is sprinting, and I'd say maybe 50% of their training was in the gym.
Okay.
An endurance cyclist, but I remember they used a lot of like we talked about explosiveness, but there's another like I don't know if it's called like repetitiveness or but like they would do explosive things, but they would do it quick. Like one of these things that I remember the strength coach had me do a few times was like a banded, where like the band was wrapped around my foot and was above me. And so I'm just pushing it to the ground, but I'm doing it like as fast as I can do it with that resistance for like 30 seconds on each leg. But there's something about the quickness of the move. So like you guys are saying lift lighter. And I would even, so if you're I think there's a place where you can lift lighter and then shorten the amount, make it like boom, boom,
So
boom,
that's
boom,
more
boom.
like
Because when you're sprinting,
plyometrics.
was like, I think
Yeah,
maybe there's more of
plyometrics
a
or like agility training.
category for, yeah, exactly. Agility, plyometrics. Maybe you incorporate that into your strength training a little more as well. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. No, I totally. I
Mhm.
mean, part of being good at sprinting is improving your reaction time too, and that's part of what some of the agility or plyometrics training is doing, is like improving your ability to respond quickly. Because you can have a really good sprint, but if you're not able to respond to what's going on in the moment, then that sprint's, it's not gonna improve four wheels if you let four wheels go.
Yeah.
So I do think there's something there where like, you're actually, and this can be done even off the bike or outside of, strength training or whatever, like just improving your reaction time. There's lots of different ways you can improve your reaction time with different activities.
Mhm.
Cool. Anything else to add for Felicity here?
Oh man, I could talk about this for hours. So, assuming that you have done your heavy lifting earlier in the season, because like I said, the strength supports the power, supports the speed. Yeah, moving on to explosive lifts. It doesn't have to be, if you're not comfortable loading up a bar and doing those Olympic lifts, like you can utilize the machines, like cable leg extensions and leg curls, and similar to the box squats that Adam was describing, where you're a little slower on the eccentric and then explosive on the upward phase. You can do the same thing doing leg extensions or leg curls on the machine.
Sure.
Or if you still want to do free weight stuff but you don't want to load up the bar, then you could do like single arm dumbbell or kettlebell snatch, or kettlebell. If you don't want to move into unilateral things, you can do the kettlebell swings and things like that. But anything that requires some force velocity behind it is going to be more of a power movement.
Yeah, agreed.
Oh, and Dylan was talking about weighted box jumps. And if you do weighted box jumps, please don't jump down with the weight in hand. Like jump up with the weight and then slow step down or drop the weight and jump down.
Yeah.
But if you did them unweighted on a shorter box at a higher speed, I would consider that plyometrics. And there's, we can dive into a whole nother conversation about plyos too, but that was a good point too, to incorporate those for speed.
Yep.
I remember this one workout the gym guy had us where we're like where you're on you're sitting on your butt and you kind of lift your butt up and do crab. I guess I don't know if you call that crab position, but that's what I'll call it, where you're on all fours and you lift your butt up off the ground, and then he would just have us tap our feet as quick as possible back and forth. And the first time I did that, I could only do it for like 20 seconds, and your calves literally just stop. Like your brain is telling your feet to keep tapping, and then your feet just stop tapping, and you're like, I literally can't do this. But you do that a couple times, and you like the amount of improvement that you see over that, and it's unweighted, and you're just looking at the clock and trying to do quick feet, like tap 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 tap. And there's something about that I was like, this feels a lot like what sprinters should do, like tap 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 tap. And it was insane, like how bad, for as simple of a workout as that was, and how bad it hurt. I was like, whoa, this is effective. It felt effective.
Yeah. So I mean, what you're talking about there too is over time you're probably not only are you improving your endurance, and ability to perform it physically, but you're also probably improving things like coordination and just that like brain body connection, where your brain has to tell your muscles to move the way that you want them to. So you're probably improving that as well, which again goes back to like just overall like reaction time and ability to respond in a sprint is super important. And that's where there's like a little bit of a difference between whether we're talking about like bunch sprinting versus track sprinting, where you're having to like sprint from a standstill and like really overcome the gearing. That's like a little bit different here. Like we're when we're talking about agility and responding and some of those like plyometric movements, that's probably more specific to like bunch sprinting.
Just opening up the conversation to any cyclist too. You brought up a good point about the brain to muscle connection. Like when a person who hasn't done any strength training sees huge improvements in their first couple weeks of strength training, it's not necessarily because they got that much stronger. It's because of that neuromuscular connection where they're able to recruit more muscle fibers.
Yeah.
So.
Yep. All right, cool. Well, I think that should do it for today.
Sweet.
Thanks, guys. Drew, good luck this weekend.
Thanks.
We'll catch you guys next weekend or next week.
Sounds good.
See ya.
See ya.